right, y'all. This is The Steep. Welcome back to another episode of What's the Tea with Tim. It's your boy, Tim, and today we are diving into one of the most important conversations we need to have right now: voting. Now, this episode is just 1 week away from the presidential election, and trust me when I say this is a moment that could shape the future of this country. If you haven't made your voting plan yet, here's a reminder to show up to the polls and make your voice heard. Voting isn't just about our civic duty, it's our power as a community. Our ancestors fought for the right to vote, and we owe it to them and ourselves to make sure our voices are counted. Voting is a deeply personal topic to me. I remember being 18 years old, and it was my very first election that I got the chance to vote. I was so excited because it was my first time voting, and I just couldn't wait to get to the poll, the ballot booth, and be able to just bubble in who I wanted to see as the next president and other elected officials. It's also so funny because I remember it was raining that day, and if you didn't know, I grew up in Florida and rain just constantly happens. And it just felt like the universe didn't want me to cast my ballot. But y'all, I wanted to make sure that I did. And there was nothing stopping me that day from casting my ballot. When I got to the voting location, there were crazy long lines. But again, I wanted to make sure I casted my ballot because voting is such an important concern in today's society. So, whatever candidate you choose this election season, make sure you cast your ballots and go out and vote for who you want to see. But seriously, y'all, voting is how we create change. So today we're going to break it down. We've got a special guest who knows all about policy and voter advocacy. Let's get today's conversation and let's get to sipping. Meet Raven Sansbury, a dynamic Florida native whose passion for politics ignites her career as a policy and legislative strategist and trusted advocacy consultant. With a diverse portfolio that spans critical issues from criminal justice, voting rights, all the way to health access, Raven is a special force for impactful change. She has been recognized as a Florida Senate proclamation and congressional awardee, which highlights her dedication to community service and her ability to navigate the political landscape with finesse, fostering bipartisan policies. But there's more to Raven than just her strategic mind. She's also a gifted poet, having captivated audiences as her first winner for her homecoming talent show to ever win by performing an original poem during her undergraduate years. Raven has helped fight for voting rights through grassroots organizing, and she's here to drop some knowledge on why your vote really matters. Welcome to the show, Raven. How are you today?
Thank you, Tim. I am doing great. Thank you for the opportunity. This is something I'm super passionate about. So I am excited to really basically do some civic engagement and the biggest thing, sip some tea with Tim.
Yes, I'm so excited to get into the tea
Yeah.
today. Before we get into today's topic, Raven, I have to ask, what fills your mug? What brings you joy these days?
Thank you for that question, Tim. Shout out to my hustle juice. But yeah, what fills my mug is definitely trying new things. That's been something very big with me lately. And this really could just look like getting outside, learning new things too. I'm such an adventurous person, so I have to feed my spontaneous appetite. So, this entire year has just been an adventure. Go on a national trip, go skiing, something that I have never tried before. And it just brings me joy, trying new things that, I could tell stories about later in life. And so that has definitely been filling my mug lately.
I absolutely love that. So you went skiing recently? Where did you go?
Yeah, so I went in Nevada when they were in season, and it was super. When I say I made it down the hill one time, but that was enough. That was enough for me. Other than that, it was on flat surfaces, but yeah, definitely an experience I think everyone should try.
That's awesome. I haven't done skiing before. Maybe one day, but it's always one of those things that I'm just like, I feel like I'm gonna fall and bust my ass. I don't know. But maybe one day I'll try it.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
That is dope. Oh my gosh, Raven. And I just want to take our audience back now that we have gotten the intros out of the way. But the audience doesn't know this, but we were actually interns together back in Tallahassee, Florida, working at the
Yeah.
Capitol. Such a great experience. Oh my gosh. And I think that's when our friendship really started, was being interns together. And I think that was almost 10 years ago at this point. Am I right?
Gosh, is it? Don't Tim, don't tell our age. Um, dang, 2018. Gosh, that felt
Oh,
so
that was
long
2018.
ago.
Okay, so not exactly
It
10
does
years.
feel long ago still, though.
It
Yeah.
does. It
Mhm.
does. It does. And it's just like, I remember one celebrating your birthday because it was like legislative session and it was like February. And we had a
Oh, I
birthday
love that.
celebration for
I
you.
remember. Oh, that was so sweet. That was so sweet.
And just like being young, well, we're still young, but being
Mhm.
younger and being in Tallahassee, having a great time, networking with senators, legislators, and just meeting people from all over the state. Like it was just such a great time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
So, Raven, now that we have gotten again introductions out of the way, let's get into today's topic. And we are going to get into what we call the pour for today's topic.
Hmm.
And we're getting into something that really impacts all of us, and that is the importance of voting.
Hmm.
So, let's kick things off with the basics. Raven, why is voting so crucial, especially for young people and the Black community right now?
Thank you for this question, Tim. This is so important. First of all, the young people and the Black community are really some of the top groups that have always been important for elections. For instance, this year, Gen Z youth will really make up about 40 million voters, potential voters. And then you have the Black community and really people of color that make up a third of eligible voters. So there's always power in numbers when it comes to voting. We see that. That's basically what we count, the votes. Votes are people, votes are minds that come to the polls and put their trust in a candidate to do their job. That's also where our tax dollars go, you know? So when you go to the polls, think about where you want to put your money. Who do you trust to put your eggs in a basket for? So, yeah, at the crux of it.
Wow, like voting is so important. And honestly, I cannot wait to cast my vote on November 5th. I
Same.
already know who I'm voting for. I don't want to say a name just yet, but
See.
someone that will be making history. And both candidates can make history. We've never had a president leave office and come back before.
Right,
So,
right. Let alone, there's another side to that, Tim. It's we also will have a president, really a president that's unorthodox in form, right? And we're referring to President Trump, of course. This will be the first president that will be convicted of a crime that will could potentially enter office. And so with that, you just see how the elections are evolving as far as what we expect of our candidates. And that also goes for Kamala, first Black woman president. And on top of that, just the whole trajectory of how that is different from President Trump. And so you have those two things that are showing up at the polls this November. And so it's just a very historical time. It has been for the
yeah.
last few years already.
And that is so true. Raven, I'm interested to know, as a Black woman, in your experience, what is it like to have a candidate Kamala Harris, who is on the ticket for this year's presidential election? What does that mean to you?
It means a lot because I will say, if there is anything that has inspired me to continue existing in the political landscape, it is because, of Black women, people that really widened the pathway for me to be able to work in this space, advocate in this space. As someone who already grew up on a heart of public service, something that has always inspired me are those people that look like me. It's normal to feel that way. And this space, the political space, is not a predominantly, women-led alone space. And then when you talk about Black women, it's less representation. So to see someone at one of the, well, really the highest ranking office in the United States, potentially it's something very inspiring to see.
Wow, I love it. Shout out to the Black women.
Yes.
And specifically the Black women working in politics because
Mhm.
y'all are doing absolutely amazing work. And just Black people, it is so important that we go out and vote. Like, as y'all know, we did not have the right to vote for many years. So it's important now more than ever to express your right to vote, get out and vote for the candidate that you want to see in office. So we're going to see what November 5th brings. And
Yes,
again, I'm excited to cast my ballot.
absolutely. I might, look, I'm trying to vote early, trying to get it out of here.
Yes. Okay. Avoid the lines. Just if you are an
Right.
introvert and like
Mhm.
don't even want to deal with people, just
Right.
mail in your ballot, vote early. So that way, like November 5th,
Yes.
you're just chilling and you're
Mhm.
waiting to see the election results on CNN.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, CNN.
So, Raven, you've worked a lot with grassroots organizations like the Florida Rights and Restoration Coalition, fighting
Mhm.
against voter disenfranchisement. What are some of the biggest challenges people face when trying to vote, and how can we overcome them?
Thank you for that question, Tim. I think one of the things that I've definitely noticed from doing civic engagement is some of the voting laws are just too complex to understand. And this could look like, well, how do I request a mail-in ballot? What type of voter ID verification do I need? And then the deadlines, generally the voting deadlines, and so, really, civic engagement is something that I have been enjoying doing because it fixes a lot of these issues. People just need to know, or people, if they're not researching, it's really important that there are just resources in which, there are state resources, federal resources, a lot of organizations focusing on this effort to make sure people are aware of the voting ID laws. And so, grassroots organizing in a way could look like door to door, all the way over to talking to legislators about certain election laws or discrepancies that really impact how people vote. And so I think the biggest thing when it comes to voting is accessibility, being able to access the polls. That's one of the biggest issues.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. Raven, you mentioned resources that are available to the community in terms of getting people to understand how to register to vote or where
Mhm.
to go for the polls. What are some of your resources in Florida or resources nationwide that
Mhm.
people either may not know about or just feel like it's good to know when it comes to voting?
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim. So there's definitely one I easily send to people because it is a really huge conglomerate of links on this website. It's called vote.gov. You go to this website, you're able to see things as far as state election laws for your particular state, federal protections for voting, and then really just a long list of things you will need to be able to vote legally, to make sure you're also adhering to election laws. Again, the biggest thing too is that state election laws vary from state to state. And so, especially during election season, right? You have a lot of organizations putting a lot of their resources and time into civic engagement following elections, also doing things such as holding forums and things like this, Tim. Your podcast is super important for people. A very cool way to get out the information. Look, I tell people politics is only boring because it's not communicated in a way that people would want to receive. And so this is perfect. This is perfect.
I appreciate that, Raven. And I feel like there's just so much information out there, sometimes misinformation about
Yes.
candidates and either candidates, the policies. And it's like you have to really be mindful of the source of the
Hmm.
information that you're really getting.
Hmm.
So, yeah. I have another question for you. For folks that feel like there is a barrier, that there's something in the way of them not being able to vote, like being previously incarcerated or having to deal with the complex voter ID laws, what can they do to make sure they can still exercise their right to vote?
Mhm. I will first throw out there, this is such a big issue, especially in states like Florida that have the highest percentages of returning citizens compared to the national rate. And so one thing that is super important is that know that are organizations that focus on voting laws and voting protections, including voting education as it relates to people with past convictions. Now, this has been a complex issue really because, at least in states like Florida, and we have always been a battleground state for a long while, um, the process for people with past convictions to check their voter eligibility is a slow process. It could be processes known as an advisory opinion process where you get clarity from the Department of State on if you're eligible to vote, or if you really achieved doing things like paying your financial obligations. For people with past convictions or past records, this could look like fines and fees, court fees, and things like probation. Just making sure you have taken care of these things before you're eligible to vote are super important.
Wow, thanks for sharing, Raven. And I hate how the system or the justice system puts such a barrier on certain groups of people to not be able to vote.
Mhm,
And I feel this is just my opinion when it comes to this topic. Like, if you are an American born citizen and you
mhm.
are of the age to vote, whether or not you are incarcerated, have had a history of concerns in the past, like you should be able to vote for the candidate that you want to see in office because at the end of the day, even if you are incarcerated or even if you are going through a troubling time in your life, these are candidates that are going to change the policies and change the way that you could potentially leave from being incarcerated.
Right, exactly.
So it's important that you are that they have the access to vote.
hmm hmm I definitely feel that, Tim, especially again in a state like Florida, because we have been a state that really has shined light on voter election processes. For instance, Amendment 4 in 2018, over 60% of voters supported Amendment 4, which basically was the automatic restoration of voting rights for returning citizens. And so people know the importance of what voting is, especially when it comes to numbers. There are over 1 million people in Florida with past records or who are returning citizens. And so, with those being potential voters, that is a huge impact on how elections could look like at every level. And so, I will definitely say it just goes into look, the numbers. People know that those numbers mean a lot when it comes to voting. Unfortunately, even with a great amendment like Amendment 4, you have the state legislature that passes laws to kind of undermine the people's vote, what people actually support. And so it's very important to, at every level of government, to just continue voting because people are going to try to find a way to undermine voting protections and laws.
Yeah. And I love how you just mentioned that it's important to vote at every level because I feel like there is a misconception, and we talk about this every election season, how the president
Mhm.
makes all of the decisions at that federal level. And that's not true.
Right.
Like you have to vote for your state elected officials and also your local elected officials because that is where change, the physical change that you want to see within your neighborhood, if there
Mhm.
is a street that is not getting fixed,
Right.
that city manager, that elected official, they have the power to change that. So it's important
Exactly.
to vote at all levels, local, state, and federal, not just at the presidential or federal level.
Right. And I tell that is such a great point, Tim, especially local elections. I tell people all the time, if someone starts at the local level for an office, most of the time they're looking to go up. You might see them in the state legislature and you need to vote for them then. You've seen them at the local level. You've seen what they did at the local level. get to the state level, and they might go federal. A lot of politicians become career politicians, so it's important that this part of their story is your vote, which is your belief in them to do their job.
Exactly. And as they continue to climb the political ladder, you want to make sure that you have a candidate that is reflective of your ideals.
Exactly. Agreed. Agreed.
Wow, Raven. I love how you mentioned grassroots moments earlier. Could you talk a little bit more about how community organizing plays a role in protecting our voting rights? How
Of
important is it for us to show up for each other?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tim. I think, look, just considering the challenges in voting, right? You have barriers to access, you have complex voting ID laws, people with previous incarceration, even things like language and disability access. So, really, one thing that is super important with grassroots and showing up for each other is empowerment. Look, being able to mobilize individuals to really advocate for their rights collectively. Education, I emphasize civic engagement as much as possible, considering that it's just one way to inform the community about voting processes and rights. Advocacy, pushing for policies that make voting more accessible, doing this in groups. We've seen this in movements in history all the way up into now of what happens when people use grassroots efforts to push for advocacy and policies that make voting more accessible and just really making it make sense. In a state, certain states should just have voting laws that make things less accessible for the general population, even on top of how minority populations might already experience complex access getting to the polls. And then it's just one to round that up, it's really a great support network, building a sense of solidarity and encouraging voters to turn out. There's something about being in a group that sees an effort like voting as one of the biggest things to do multiple times per year. So being able to do that, definitely something important for grassroots and coming together collectively for something as big as voting.
So Raven, could you share a little bit more about what grassroots means for someone who just doesn't even know what it means to be grassrooting?
Yeah, of course. So, love this question, first of all. So, grassroots efforts refer to initiatives and movements that originate or start at the community level. And it really focuses on mobilizing individuals and groups to create change from the bottom up. Most of the time, it is from the bottom up. And so, some key values within this is community driven. You're focusing on local issues. Again, one big thing is mobilization, being able to move people, and also tools like petitions, campaigns. It's a sense of empowerment where you're really giving individuals a voice. Making sure that individuals have a voice is super important to grassroots. Collaboration, knowing what you're fighting for is sustainable. You don't want to fight for something that's going to continue to hit a brick wall. If there's a brick wall, you want to know that you're willing to do the grassroots to jump over that brick wall, if that makes sense. And then using diverse methods. This could really just be various strategies to reach people, social media, community meetings, your podcast, Tim, again, educational workshops, things like that are all part of grassroots activities.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. And I heard you say making sure people just have a voice, making sure there's collaboration and using diverse methods like social media. I also heard you say the importance of just mobilizing to advocate for rights and pushing for policies. We are stronger together. And as you mentioned, having a support network can be happening through mobilizing and also grassrooting as well. I really want to go back to the point, and it just feels as though that you can have change with one person, but you are stronger with numbers. So if there is a policy or something that you would like to see change within your local community or at the state or federal level, it's important to have people who also support you within whatever it is that you're fighting for. Am I
Mhm.
hearing you correctly?
Yes, absolutely, Tim. You definitely want to be able to make sure when you make decisions like these that there are people out there that align with your values. Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So sometimes people may feel like their vote doesn't matter.
Hmm.
What would you say to someone who is discouraged or
Hmm.
think that their vote won't make a difference?
So first, the most important thing is this is such a big thing. We see it everywhere. There's people that are super like your vote matters. They're really to get out there with a picket sign and say it. And then you have the other people like, look, what is my one vote finna do? Well, let me tell you something. Your vote counts. You have to think about it. They would have not spent hundreds of years at this point trying to disenfranchise your vote in so many ways. We can talk about the civil rights movement. We can talk about how women weren't even to vote at some point. And people are whoever tried to pass things like laws to make voting inaccessible or pass laws that speak to voter oppression. You have to understand that your vote is so powerful that they've spent so much time trying to disenfranchise it. There is nothing that people would spend much time on if they know it didn't count. So it's just a long game. And we've seen it historically all the way up into now. Voting oppression still exists. It existed more back then, but it's now so complex, so many loopholes to it that you just have to pay attention. So for the people that are sitting on your couch, you got to look at the world around you and really understand it. A lot of it has to do with politics, and politics does stem from how people make decisions because we make up those groups that vote for these people that represent us. Quick math.
This is so true, Raven. And I love what you said about like there are billions of dollars out there for to try to stop people from voting.
Hmm.
And they know that your vote matters. So they're going to try to stop you from going to the polls because they ultimately want whoever they want in office. So if
Exactly.
who they want in office is not what you feel like is the best candidate for you,
Hmm.
the important thing for you to do is to vote for the candidate that you think represents you.
Exactly. Period. Period. Yep,
Wow.
definitely.
Wow. And like you mentioned, they wouldn't be spending all this money if it wasn't important. So,
Hmm. Exactly.
whew, I mean, I wish I had billions of dollars in my account right now. Like,
But to spend it on something good, I'm sure.
right, to spend it on something good. I need a Lucci, Louis Gucci
Yes, yes.
bag. Raven, I'm curious to know though, because we talked about the importance of voting and voting advocacy. Is there a particular success story that you've had where voting advocacy led to real and tangible change?
Mm. So this one is through a different lens. I remember working in the Florida Senate, and I was working for a senator that really prioritized criminal justice. And where I realized voting mattered is we took constituent services very seriously, especially when it came to people that were dealing with past records. And so, down just to get to the point, I was helping this person that was incarcerated basically get support from the senator to get his sentencing reduced. And because people chose a senator that was willing to fight for people, especially people that demonstrated that they were rehabilitated, were really ready for a restorative journey, that voting there was successful. Everyone that voted for that particular senator really created success stories because of his advocacy and his promises that he kept for his voters and constituents. And it also came out in the staff. The type of things that happens in these legislative offices only happen because people do have common sense to vote for good people that become elected officials that make change, such as writing a letter to help reduce somebody's sentence because they've demonstrated that they're ready to enter back into society. So things like that, I do definitely perceive as a voting success story because it just came from people. The voting success is how people voted for someone that would represent them genuinely while in office.
Wow, that is an absolutely amazing story, Raven. I just want to follow up on having that person, the sentencing reduce. Since you were working in the legislative office, like what was that process like? I
Mhm.
want to dive deeper a little bit more there if you can share a little bit more.
Of course. Yeah. So definitely working in a legislative office, you become super knowledgeable about the different things you can do, really the power you have and the influence. I think one of my favorite things was doing constituent services on top of participating in the policy process. Constituent services is really the crux of what public service is. You're showing people that you actually care. And first of all, that's really what a government is supposed to do. You're not supposed to just govern. You're not supposed to just tell people what to do. Help your people. Help your people do your job because people voted for you. And that's really the biggest promise you need to worry about. Not if you're going to be in that seat next year. Who did you help while you was in office? You know what I mean? So just definitely one of the biggest things that describes that whole process. So it really taught me how to understand people from all walks of life as well. So definitely provided me with the tools to go out in the community and make better change.
I really love that you shared that, Raven. Thank you. And I feel like legislators and having to deal with constituents need a certain level of empathy,
Mhm.
so that way they can understand the issues that are truly going on within the community and really make that impactful change that the constituents want to see.
Exactly. And it's what I want people to know too. It's really, you will know how successful your vote was, how someone does in their years of office. They show you upfront who they are, what's important to them, and they show you upfront if they can keep their promises. And so, again, that points to if you believe your vote doesn't matter, I promise you, I promise you, everything is connected to a vote. Everything, everything.
It really is. Oh my gosh. Raven, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk more about you. So we're
Okay,
gonna,
okay.
yeah, we're gonna get to the tea on Raven.
Oh my goodness.
I want to take a quick sip.
Mhm.
But from what I know about you, and I want our audience to hear as well, I know you've been working in policy and advocacy for a many number of years. What inspired you to get involved in this kind of work? Was it a specific moment that you knew this was your calling?
Thank you for that question, Tim. I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. I grew up in a single parent household. Parents were never married, and I was low income. So watching my mom make things happen really inspired me, even as a little girl, to grow up and want to see better of the things around me. So, how I was raised to be humble, to be empathetic, and to be considerate of others, and also help people where you can. And so growing up on those values really kind of contextualized itself into getting involved in politics simply through, especially when I got involved in college, with my undergrad degree being in poli sci, and then going to graduate school and participating in a lot of legislative opportunities. And so, really, just again, upbringing, the type of things that I got involved in as an early younger adult, and I will definitely say seeing someone smile just off a few minutes of being on a phone call with them, knowing that what they need has been moved even a foot or even an inch is worth it at the end of the day. Worth it, worth the extra hours spent, worth the time that I may not sleep. So just helping people brings me joy too. That's also always been in my cup.
Oh, Raven, you are a gem. You are just absolutely amazing. And we're very similar. I also came from a single parent home, and I can see times where, and we didn't have the most amount of money. My mom was a teacher.
Hmm.
So we were very middle class, probably lower middle class, if anything, especially in Florida, because teachers don't make anything in Florida.
Right.
Um, and I didn't have a bad childhood growing up. Like it was my mom obviously sacrificed for us, but she did what she could, you know?
Right.
So like she, I feel like was the moment for me for seeing her be so passionate about education and rights for children and homelessness. Like she was very much someone to give to the community, and I feel like that also fueled my passions when it comes to
Yes.
voting and community engagement. So thank you for sharing your story, and you are doing absolutely amazing work in the community, so
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Finally, Raven, voting is just the start.
Mhm.
After Election Day, after November 5th, after we know who the next president is going to be or who the next elected officials are going to be at the state and local level, how
Mhm.
can people stay engaged to continue to make change within their community?
This is an awesome question because people think the biggest day is election day. Essentially, yes, you can say that. But the biggest day or days is the days that come after whoever gets in office, if they keep their promises, if they keep their promises, especially to the people, is one of the biggest days. And so I think with that, you have to continue to advocate, especially in spaces where you see that your candidate that you voted for is sort of kind of not keeping their promises. And then you need to understand why that promise may not be able to be kept or if who is it on? You know, you have to look at the sort of power stakeholders that surround these areas. And so being able to continue your advocacy with certain policies, continuing to educate others, share the knowledge about what voting means even after elections, and really share those processes in your community. One thing that is also super important is to participate in governance. Attend events that really help you engage with elected officials. That is one big thing that is super important. And that will get you closer to seeing if the person that you voted for is keeping up with what they promised you. Again, monitoring policies. We put these people in offices because a lot of the time they are responsible for passing policies that change the political world around us, including voting rights and our ways of participating in advocacy efforts. So that is really just the center of it all. Staying involved, being educated, participating in the legislative process are really big things.
That is so true, Raven. And November 5th, that's
Yes,
just the day to
yes.
vote. That's
That's
just the
just the
day to
day to
vote.
vote.
The work
Look,
starts after November 5th.
exactly, exactly. Pay attention. Pay attention.
Pay
It might not
attention.
be televised. Pay
Uh,
attention.
hello, okay? Because there are some shady politicians out there, okay?
Right.
But ideally, I heard you say that it's important to really hold our elected officials accountable. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, they are representing who we are as people, and we want to make sure that they are carrying out their duties, making sure they are reflective of the constituents of the people that put them in office. And I love that you said to participate in governance because I feel like that's one thing that people forget to do is
Hmm.
to attend meetings, is to make sure that their voice is heard. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah, definitely, Tim. There's a lot that goes on. And I really say I hate that some of the events that people miss out on become shadows because that's where some of the policies are. Why didn't you show up to that town hall to tell them, look, my tax money is going to you. Why are you not doing your job? You can't blame it on
Facts.
nobody else because this part of your job doesn't need nobody but you to say yes or no. So you just got to really pay attention to what's going on. And that's part of it. So thank you for bringing that up again, Tim.
Yes, of course, Raven. All right, y'all. Y'all know what time it is. We
Uh-oh.
we always end with a little game and some fun, and it's time for a Sippin the Facts.
Let's go.
Now, here's the kicker. My producer did not let me in on the answers either, so I'm in the dark, just like you, Raven. We're both going to guess in real time. I'm going to throw out some trivia questions about Black women in US history who've paved the way for voting rights, civil rights, and justice, and we'll see who has got the right answers. No pressure though. Let's see who's sipping and who's tripping.
Let's go. Let's go.
Are we ready? Okay. This iconic Black woman was a key figure in women's suffrage movement and fought tirelessly for both women and African American rights. Who is she? Is she
Mm,
A, Sojourner Truth, B, Ida B. Wells, or C, Fannie Lou Hamer?
mm.
I don't know this one. I'm gonna be honest.
I am going to say something tells me it's Ida B. Wells. Is that right?
I'm gonna go
Sojourner
with
Truth, Miss Truth.
okay. So
Really?
so hmm.
Hmm.
Ida did some good stuff too, but I'm gonna
She
leave
did. She
it.
did.
Thank you.
So Sojourner was the right answer. I had no idea. Thank you,
Ooh,
producer.
thank you.
Question number two. This fierce civil rights activist was instrumental in organizing the march that led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, famously saying, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." Who is she? Is she A, Angela Davis, B, Fannie Lou Hamer again, or C, Shirley Chisholm? My answer, I'm going to say A, Angela Davis.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Angela Davis too. Shirley
Okay.
Chisholm is great too, but yeah, Angela Davis for sure.
Producer, where we get?
This one was Fanny.
Oh!
No way.
Oh my
Fanny. I
God.
don't think I need to look up the timeline, but I don't know if Angela was that active in 1965 yet. I don't know. I think she was like the 70s for Angela. I think
Okay.
she was like the 70s, 80s. And I think Fanny, yeah, I think Angela was like, well, she is like 70, but I don't know. I don't think she was like that active that yet at 65.
Mm, mm.
Oh wow. Well,
But good answer.
Raven,
Thanks for
clearly
that.
we are both getting a women's history lesson here.
Yeah. It's a little embarrassing for me.
Oh my God. Okay, we have to get this next one. Question number three. This groundbreaking attorney became the first Black woman elected to the US Congress and was a strong advocate for voting rights, famously saying, "I am not a trial lawyer, but I am a trial by fire." Who is she? Is
Mm,
she A, Barbara Jordan, B, Constance Baker Motley, or C, Kamala Harris? This is actually kind of hard.
Do process of elimination. So we know it
uh,
can't be one person.
even then.
I
May I hear the answers again? I'm sorry, y'all.
yeah, is she A, Barbara Jordan, B, Constance Baker Motley, or C, Kamala Harris?
Mm,
I'm gonna say this is just me. This is just me. I'm probably wrong, but I'm gonna go with Kamala Harris because I feel like Kamala's a hot topic right now.
mhm.
You know, would love for her to be the next president.
Read
I'm
the
gonna just go with
question
Kamala Harris.
again.
Okay,
Read
so
the
the
beginning of the question. And you think it's Kamala Harris?
But it's okay.
Read the
Yeah.
question again, Timothy.
question three. This groundbreaking attorney became the first Black woman elected to U.S. Congress. Oh, Kamala was not in U.S. Congress.
Thank you. Thank you. And she was definitely not the
Ah,
first.
that is so funny. Well, I guess process of elimination, I got it wrong. It's clearly not Kamala Harris. So, Raven, I'll let you choose A or B, Barbara Jordan or B, Constance Baker Motley.
I'm gonna say B.
Is Barbara Jordan producer? Ah!
Oh my goodness.
We are
I
butchering
need
these
to
questions.
refresh.
We got to go back to civics, okay?
Yes, for sure. This is embarrassing.
Okay. I feel like we need to get this next one. We need to.
Yes, yes, need to. Redemption, please.
Redemption, yes. Big money, big money. Question 4. Known as a fierce journalist and anti-lynching activist, this woman fought for voting rights and co-founded the NAACP. Who is she? Is she A, Coretta Scott King, B, Ida B. Wells, or C, Ella Baker?
This has to be Ida B. Wells. And
I'm going with Raven. It has to be Ida B. Wells.
it gotta be. Give me something because she's affiliated with the
Ding, ding, ding.
NAACP.
Correct.
Yay, we got it right. Yes. Shout out to our good Judy Ida.
Shout out to real
Ida?
journalism.
Real journalism.
Real journalism.
She was bad.
Yes.
Bad.
Raven, this is our last question. Question 5. This woman's legal advocacy helped dismantle Jim Crow laws, paving the way for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Who is she? Is she A, Constance Baker Motley, B, Thurgood Marshall? That's not a woman. C, Shirley Ann Jackson.
This is a good one. Okay, I know Constance. I'm just thinking of who is a lawyer.
No, go with your gut. Go with your gut.
But
Yeah, go with your gut, Raven.
Go
my
with your
gut is
gut.
Constance. Is it Constance?
Is it
Ding, ding,
Constance?
ding, 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 ding.
Yes.
Okay.
She was a civil rights lawyer,
Yes.
so I'm like, let's go, let's go. Okay.
Shout out to Constance. Well, Raven, thank you for being on today's episode for What's the Tea with Tim. Thank you for all of the amazing work that you are doing in policy, advocacy, community engagement, policy strategy, getting the people to go out and vote and out here changing lives. Where can the people find you on social media?
Thank you for that, Tim. And thank you for the opportunity. I think, again, I am so super proud of platforms like yours getting the news out about how important issues like this are. People can find me on Instagram at Raven is Raven. Again, Raven, IS Raven. So you can find me there. Feel free to reach out if you even need help with voting education. Anything that I could possibly help with, please reach out. Feel free.
Awesome. Thank you, Raven, so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
And one last sip before you hit the road.
One last sip of the hustle juice.
All right, y'all. We've come to the part of the show I like to call the last drop. This is where we take a final moment to reflect on what we talked about today and drive home on the main message. It's that last sip of wisdom before we head out, and today it's all about the power and responsibility we have when it comes to voting. Voting isn't just a right, it's how we shape our communities, our country, and our future. If anything from today's conversation with Raven stood out, it's that the fight for our voting rights has been long and hard fought. It's on us to carry that legacy forward. So before we go, I want to remind you to head over to canivote.org or vote.org. Whether it's checking your voter registration, finding your nearest polling place, or getting registered for the first time, this is your one-stop shop. Your vote is your voice, and it's a voice that deserves to be heard. Just like this sign says, get up and vote. Big shout out to Raven for all of the insights she's dropped today. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, follow us on social media, and leave a review. We love hearing your feedback. That's it for today. I'm Tim, signing off with one final sip of tea. Until next time.